All right. Well, thank you for joining us. My name is Sam Lords-Baird. I'll introduce myself a little bit more as we go through. We are going to be talking about our work at onboarding our new staff and trying to use technical change to support retention today. So hopefully that's what you jumped in for. We are really glad that you are here. And again, as we go through, you're welcome to put questions in the chat. We'll try to keep an eye on that, but you are also welcome to come off mute and just ask your questions out loud if they are coming up and you want to make sure that we catch them. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Our agenda today includes introductions of who we are and our context, where we're coming to you from, and what outcomes we are aiming to meet today. And then we also will talk a little bit about the theoretical framework that we used in order to assess our context and allow you to assess your context and what might be most helpful for you. And then we'll talk about the strategy that we landed on at the Graham family of schools and how we plan to implement it and are implementing it. Again, if you would like to ask questions, we absolutely welcome those. We want to interact with you. We want to hear what your questions are, any comments you have. So please drop those in the chat. Or if you want to jump in and come off mute, you are also welcome to do that. And again, if you would like to have your camera on, you're more than welcome to. If you would like to have your camera off, whatever best meets your needs, please do that. Okay. All right. So I am Sam Lords-Baird. I am an instructional coach at the Charles School at Ohio Dominican University. If you haven't heard of the Charles School before, it's located in Columbus, Ohio. If you know Columbus pretty well, we're in like the South Linden area. And we are an early college high school. We partner with Ohio Dominican University for our students to be able to take college classes while they're here with us. I started out my career as an English teacher. I started in 7th grade at another school for a couple of years in 2013. And then in 2015, I made my way to the Charles School as an English teacher here. And I did that for 4 years. And then Ed and some other administrators were kind enough to let me give instructional coaching a shot starting in 2019. And I've been doing that ever since. So I'll turn it over to Ed so he can tell you a little bit about himself and our other 2 schools in the family.
Yeah, and it has been a great decision to let Sam do that. She's been exceptional at it. It's really helped out a lot. Hello, everybody. My name is Ed Ingman. I'm a co-superintendent with the Graham family of schools. We are 3 community schools here in Columbus, Ohio. We have the Graham School, which was founded in 2000, is one of the oldest community schools in the state. A few years later, in 2007, we founded the Charles School at Ohio Dominican University as an early college high school. Both high schools, we learned a lot of lessons. And then a few years after that, we founded Graham Elementary and Middle School, which is a K-8 program, really close to Ohio State's campus. And that's actually where I'm at now. Sam's at Charles and I'm at GEMS. And the schools are in session. So if you hear bells, if you hear announcements, if you hear kids, there's recess right outside this window over here. So sometimes that bleeds through. So if you're in a school setting, you'll definitely recognize those noises. I started out as a science teacher at the Graham School, and then was a founding science teacher at the Charles School, became a dean in 2009. And then I took a little excursion and I left Columbus and went with the Accelerate Institute principal fellowship out of Chicago, and I was placed in Memphis for 2 years. It was a middle school principal there and learned a lot of great leadership lessons. And I came back, became a dean again at the Charles School, and now assistant superintendent, and then to being a superintendent. Our founding superintendent retired after 20 some years, and so he is enjoying his retirement now, and we wish him well, and we definitely miss him. But that's a little bit about who we are in our context. If you are a community school leader here in the call, you'll definitely recognize some of the things that we're going to talk about and like the challenges, because we know as community schools that we do the same with less inputs, and so we work really hard to make sure that we have equitable outcomes for our kids.
Just before we
All right, so
go ahead.
What's that?
I just wanted to make sure, Katie, is the chat available for everyone to be able to ask questions in?
Everybody should have access, yes.
Okay. If it's not working for you, can you let us know in the Q&A, please? So there we go. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Ed. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, great, and thank you for that. And we are also recording the session with transcripts just so folks are aware. During this session, we really hope that you can take away a few things for your own context and learn from what we decided to do, and you can apply it to help your kids and your staff and work on retention. Obviously, it's a key need for all schools in Ohio. So we hope that you'll be able to assess your key needs to retain and support your current staff. Determine process that will assist you in identifying strategies that engage staff professionally, and then identify and curate resources that are already available, perhaps, that will help you develop a process to engage all staff around the professional learning that's important to you, because that is really what is the focus for us. This all started for us when the Experience Management Institute and ODEW presented this pilot project last year. We're really excited and honored to be invited to be part of this. We're, I think, the only community school that was part of the pilot project. And I thought that we were able to work with a lot of traditional schools around the state on focusing on a task or a project that impacts us in our district, our local area. So we learned a lot from Chagrin Falls and Cincinnati and other districts around the state. So this all came out of that. So thank you, Experience Management Institute. Thank you, ODEW. I know there's a few folks on the call. We really appreciate being able to go through that. We met with them. We basically had every month we had a task to do and something to work on that helped us dig deeper into this project and then fully develop it. And so one thing that's really nice about it is it kind of created the space for us to explore, to think, and then to try things on, to get feedback from other folks and get their insights, to learn from them, to hear what they're doing, to get excited about what they're doing and say, well, let's do that next. So there is a lot that we learned from this. And so we hope that this will be helpful to you as you go through. So one of our first steps, and we'll talk more theoretical and a little more abstract at the beginning part, and then we'll weave in and really talk about what we specifically did. So one of the very first things that we did with the pilot was to look at and assess our needs. So what are the current challenges that you face on staffing? And so we think about this, we think about it in three big domains around talent acquisition, talent development, and total rewards. And one of the tasks that you want to do is obviously do a self-assessment, determine for multiple stakeholders, what are the things that are going well around these three domains, what are the challenges you have, and comparing and getting different perspectives really allows you to sort of cross reference folks' viewpoints. And so, thinking about building leaders, district leaders, HR folks, people like Sam as instructional coach, folks who are in leadership roles around CTE, around counseling, are all folks that you can bring in that will give you a really great viewpoint of what are things that are challenging. And then we didn't do this, but bringing in teacher voice can be really helpful, staff voice, so that from their perspective. It's not just you sitting in your office thinking about your perspective, you're engaging them and bringing them in. And so one thing that you also can do as you're thinking this through is what are the challenges that you're as you're doing your self-assessment, what are the challenges that you're noticing? And think about the rebuttals, right? So you already know your folks in your context, you already know what they're going to say. Hey, yeah, we can't do this because of that, or what, if we do this, that's going to cause this problem. Thinking about those and thinking about what are the strategies, what are the solutions that could help us navigate through that, instead of saying, well, we can't do that and moving on to the next thing. Think about how you can manage the project and process to get to that outcome. So I just invite you to take a moment before we pause, jump into the next slide. What are the current challenges that you face with your staff? You can share this or just keep it in your head, jot a note down. You feel free to do whatever you'd like there.
I'm sorry, what was the question again real quick?
Think about what are the current challenges that you face with staffing for your school or for your location. All right, Sam, let's jump into that next slide. We're gonna talk a little bit more about the self-assessment domain. So EXMI had a really awesome tool that was a self-assessment, and it was really built for like one person to provide input. We took it, we added tabs, we put everybody into it in a Google sheet, and then we all took it and it combined the scores for it. So we could look at each of these domains to see how we fared. So talent acquisition is really about your recruitment strategies and outcomes. So the teacher affairs, where do you post your job postings, like, you know, Indeed, or the ODEW one, I think it's like Mindspring. You know, where are you posting this? How are you getting the word out that you have openings at your school? And then how are you reviewing those applications as they come in, those resumes as they come in? And how are you also, and this is a really strategic one, you got to think through, how are you monitoring for bias within your process? It tends to be, we you know, humans, we tend to be a little bit more narcissistic. We hire people that act like us, look like us, that we recognize something in, but that's not great for leadership. You need to bring in multiple people with different perspectives and different skill sets. But you think about when we talk about fit, like what are the value fits within our organization? What are the people who are going to have the same values, or how we work with students and how we collectively work together and collaborate, and how we value the work and what we do. And that's so important. So monitoring bias is a huge one. Talent development is really, so now you've hired folks. How are you developing? How do you onboard them? How do you make sure that they have everything that they need when they start on day one? You know, technology, the copier code, all of the things, the keys that they need to get into the rooms. There's that piece. Also, how do you assist your stakeholders with implementing evaluation and support systems effectively? Obviously, there's OTES, and then the OSES and OPES, all of those evaluation systems, but that's not quite enough, because it doesn't capture all the work. How are you also focusing on the professional development pieces that your folks need, that your staff needs to be successful in their jobs? How are you providing continuing education for them so that they can thrive in their role and start to give back, and not just not just do the job, but also give to the community? And the last one is total rewards. So, you know, we're talking about compensation packages, we're talking about benefits packages. How do you make your market your system to be, or your school to be really effective and competitive to others? Because obviously that matters a lot. We know that. And then how do you communicate within your organization for opportunities within the organization, transfers, promotions, demotions? Hopefully that doesn't happen, but you know, it can. Sam and I happen to be beneficiaries of promotions where we started in one role and we're now in totally different roles. And so, you know, how do you make that clear for people? How do you present those opportunities so people know that this is something I could work for, and I see options and opportunities in this organization that I really value? Well, we did our self-assessment. We really settled on talent development. So total rewards, however, was our lowest category. Across the board, we had 6 different people do the self-assessment, and we were like, total rewards needs to be focused on. However, we have been focusing on it a lot, and we've been thinking about it a lot. And what I said earlier really applies here. You know, we have to do the same with less as community school leaders in Ohio. So you have to think like, there's only so much we can do here that we haven't already explored. So we didn't think that was going to be our best area to focus on for this project. But for talent development, we said we haven't really worked on this much. Like everybody, all 3 of our schools have been doing things differently for years, and we haven't really combined and collaborated on efforts to support one another and take good things that are happening at all 3 schools and share them, so that everybody is onboarding, you know, with some continuity, of course, across the schools, but also learning from each other. And so that's why we focus on talent development, was because we just felt like that was untapped. It was an untapped area right now. So you think about your setting, and you know, you don't have the self-assessment right now, which is it's a good one that I think, you know, hopefully we could provide that for you. But there's think about your area. What are some things? Which of these areas might be more appealing to you to focus on for your school or your setting? And just take a couple of seconds to think about that. You can drop it in the chat, or you can come off mic if you would like to talk about it. Oh, thank you, Dr. Kandahar, for putting in the self-assessment. That's awesome. I didn't see that. All right, so now the assess needs. So the other things that you want to consider, we thought these are really valuable things from our vantage point that helped us out quite a bit, is we conduct exit interviews for every staff member who has left our schools, whether it be that they've left, you know, they've moved out of town. They've taken another role at another school. We asked them to leave. We do exit interviews and we ask them to contribute, give us an idea of their experience. And so we looked at that, really helpful. If you don't do a staff voice survey, I know we have to do student voice surveys in the state, but if you don't do a staff voice survey, you really should consider how do you bring that in, and thinking about how you're getting input from your staff, your teachers, your front desk, all your folks to make your school better. What we did is we took in that data and we cross-referenced it with that self-assessment to really get a deeper gauge of how people were experiencing the work. And then we also cross-referenced it with those exit interviews, say, okay, so people who are leaving, and maybe if they were leaving by their own choice because they found a different role, did it connect back to the things that we noticed in the self-assessment around talent development? And then we always throw in family and student input. We want to know what are our families and what are our students saying. This one didn't connect as well for us, but we did find some things from our students that said, sometimes maybe the teachers seemed disorganized, or they just didn't seem like they knew where things were. That comes up kind of randomly on the side, and so that you'll find out how that connects to the project here in a little bit in a couple other slides. So maybe think about other ways that you can assess your needs in your specific in your school setting. Okay, so now we think about assets. So now we think about all the challenges. What can we bring to bear to solve our problems, right? So where we started to think through who are our people and what assets are they bringing to it? What are the materials that are out there that we already have on site? And not thinking about like buying more things or ordering more things, just looking around and doing an inventory basically of the materials that we have. And then, thinking about the lessons that we've been learning and how we've grown in our knowledge as a staff, and bringing that to bear. So we looked at our experience of our building leads. We have a lot of experience there, and they've been doing this for a while. They were teachers or counselors before they became building leads. And so we're like, wow, there's a lot of knowledge there. And then there's a lot of experience with those teams. So they've been doing onboarding for a while, and they've been doing it solo without a collective support. So we were like, man, we've got a lot of untapped assets there that we can talk to the building leads to help and support. And then we also looked around and said, what do we have at our schools, at our sites that will help us do a project around talent development? And so we looked, and we've had people go to national conferences and present. They've been highlighted regionally and in various professional development opportunities. And so we already know that they already have a ton of stuff already that they've done, or they've been going to PD and pulling back resources that we could potentially bring into this. And so we wanted to use those experiences, and then years and years worth of schedules of professional development for onboarding to look at and say, what is it that we've been doing, and then sort of grading it and saying, how well did we do there and what could we have done differently. And before COVID, I think like a lot of schools, we were very much a traditional looking classrooms. We had computer carts that we'd wheel into the classrooms and wheel back out, but we weren't one-to-one, and we're now one-to-one. And while we're in-person school, brick and mortar, we did learn a lot of lessons in COVID where we went virtual and did virtual teaching for a while. And so we were like, that's an asset. We can learn from that. And so we had to bring in a bunch of materials to be able to do that. So we looked at all those as assets. So take a moment in your own context and think about what assets you could bring to bear for challenges that you've already thought through. All right, the next thing to think through is, as you're thinking about, and you're starting to, at this point, the project is starting to gel, and things are starting to get into clarity and focus. And so once we got to this step, we looked at a SWOT analysis. And if you've ever done SWOT analysis, you get the idea. You're taking that project, you're taking that activity that you're doing, you're running it through these 4 areas to think through what has everything that we thought about, and then what do we need to continue to think about. Okay, No matter what you end up choosing for a project, what you're trying to onboard, there's going to be things to put into all 4 of these categories. And so you think about strengths. These are what resources we have that we can employ. What are the advantages of doing this? What is going to be better about our organization because we have done this? And how much better are we going to be, after we finish this? But then also, what are the weaknesses? What are we lacking that we need to pull in? How are we going to overcome that challenge? And then, when we start to struggle, where do we think we're going to start to struggle? So you're kind of pre-planning the problems that you might see. The opportunities, when you think through the opportunities, we're thinking through what is this going to create for us that we don't have now? How is this going to be something that we could, position and use for other stakeholders? Right now we're getting to meet a bunch of new people across the state. You're getting a chance to learn about that. This is an opportunity that, we wouldn't have thought about when we started this project, but that is something that's here as well, right? And then what threats we're facing. We think threats, I think that's often a very loaded word. What we mean by threats is if you're focused on this, what is not getting your attention? If you're focused on this project, what's not getting your attention that is going to start to, that's going to cause problems, or things are going to fall apart because you're not giving it the time and attention that you normally would. How might this throw somebody off that you work with? What challenges might it create for somebody that was unintended? And so it's the weaknesses and threats. I always think about these are opportunities to pre-plan solutions and think through how do we mitigate this? How do we understand this? What do we need to do differently to make sure that this is successful? I've done projects where we've not gone through some level of a SWOT analysis, and I always go back and go, the challenges we had were preventable because we could have done our homework and we could have done better because we looked at those things. So it's worth doing that homework. It's an extra step, but it's a worthwhile extra step if you can pre-plan solutions to problems that you can anticipate will come up. So SWOT analysis is a good one to bring in. We're going to spend as much time with that, but now we want to transition a little bit. So we've been talking about like the theoretical frame, if you will, with a little bit of like weaving in our story. We're going to talk now just almost completely about how we did what we did. Okay. So in project scope, we talked about, we reviewed what we have had so far in terms of problems and challenges at our school that were common at all 3 schools. And one of the big challenges that we had with the teacher shortage was, it was hiring folks, but then also if people left mid-year for whatever reason, how do we bring in new folks so that they can be successful? Because we did see a couple of new folks that started after that August professional development, and they were lost. They had no idea how to engage in the work. They were struggling to be able to understand what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing. And it is, you name it, it's everything. It's like, how do I get into the building? Where are extra pencils? I got to complete this nurse's training so that I can, I know how to be safe with kids. And if a health crisis arises in my classroom or in my setting, it was a lot. And what we realized is nobody has time during the start of the school, once the school year started, to focus on these things that everybody else focused on in August. And what happens is those folks that come in are really in a vulnerable position and they get forgotten and their needs don't get met. And we did have at least one example where someone said, hey, this is too much, it's not for me. And so it's like, well, we spent all that time trying to get that person on board. We know we needed them, and then we lost them because of something that we could prevent. And so that's why we started to look at the project of focus on retention minded around technical things that staff needs to know. So we got that. That was our problem. We, listed our assets, talked a little bit about that. We, staff is one of our big ones. We also had lots of technology assets. We went through that assessment and that survey data and got a lot of insights because it was not clear to us that this was a problem we could track through. And then when we started to look with that problem in mind of retaining staff around technical things that would help them and support them in the classroom, and then we looked at the survey, stuff started to pop out at us in ways that we hadn't anticipated. We didn't think that this was going to be, we didn't come in predetermined, this is our project. We discovered it and realized this is a huge opportunity for us to support those staff. And then we ran through our SWOT analysis. One of the big things on the threats for our SWOT analysis is just bandwidth. We were like, how do we find time, make time there's no time to find. We had to make time. How do we make this time available to focus on this thing? Because everybody's very busy. Everybody has multiple things that they're supporting and really ultimately supporting kids. And so that was something that we were able to like understand, figure out some solutions for, because we were able to name it and name why this is important and how it matters for kids. Finally, we took that project scope that we came up with and we ran through our mission and vision statement. Say, how does this connect to who we are? Why would this be important to us to do? And that really helped bring everything into really great clarity. So we were able to write with EXMI's support. When we looked at our mission statement and think about the necessary conditions which lead us towards success for all students, we recognize that the data shows there's a disconnect with our staff. They do not feel prepared, supported, and like they have a clear understanding of where we're headed and why it's important to us. This disconnect has led to confusion, lost time on adult elements of our work rather than being focused on the students. And by adult element, it's like all of the emails, all of the G chats, all of the text messages, all the conversations in the hallway around how do I do blank? Or I didn't know I was supposed to turn this into, you know, I had to do that thing because we hadn't spent time on that. And then anytime my view is anytime we're working on those things, that's taking our attention away from kids and supporting kids. And those things are important. They need help and they need focus and they need guidance. But the why we're here is for students and for making sure our students are successful. So we really see this as an opportunity to continue to move our focus back to kids. So what we did, we had a mess of Post-it notes. We came up with, okay, in August PD, what are every piece of thing that we go through? Again, we looked at our PD schedules. What is it that we train our staff on? And we, you know, if you look at these as a building leader or working at a school, you'll recognize like some of these are actually really deep and a little overwhelming, right? They take a lot of time and they're really important. And some of these are really kind of quick hit things, right? So you think about your area, your school, what is it that you would add to this? What Post-it notes would you pull in? So as you're thinking through that, I want to take you to the next iteration of our process, which was sorting through all the mess of all those things. And we thought through, and Sam's going to show you a little bit more what that thinking through looked like. But we thought, what kind of area does this fall in? Is it a technical or logistical kind of professional development? Is it cultural? Is it skills, or is it mindset? And what we quickly threw out was we cannot focus for bringing on new staff members and for the kind of change that this represents, the kind of training that this represents. This is not a culture. This is not something that we can address culture in our buildings. We have to do that with the people face to face. We have to work with them on things that we deem as cultural. So like how we talk to our kids, how we engage kids in our lessons, things like that, how we do student discipline, how we communicate with our families. That's cultural. Skills and mindsets are really around the what we do and how we do it and why we do it. Again, you know, there's a lot of, you know, it's a Venn diagram, lots of overlap with culture, but that really was like how we roll through the work. And again, this is not what the kind of change that this is going to be good for. If we're talking about a platform that brings people in who are new and gets them the necessary training so they can start ready to go and they know how to do the various basic things, the roles of their job, we need to make sure that we really stay focused and tuned into technical logistical. And then that allows for, we know, like nurses training is one I use as an example all the time. Nurses training has to happen. People need to know how to work, you know, if a kid has a health crisis in their classroom, they need to know how to do that first. And then we can get to the other pieces later where we're talking about how do we engage students? How do we support them, like I had mentioned. So these are all technical and logistical things that we decided to start focusing on training. And then I want to zoom out again and go back to the theoretical. So what we really realized very quickly is this is a technical change that we're doing. This is not an adaptive change. An adaptive change in any organization is one that's really about the culture, the worldviews, beliefs, and values of that organization. You're not going to get to what we're talking about with the support that we're doing for these folks is not going to be an adaptive change. It's going to be a technical change where we're really focused in on the technique and expertise and the things that they can do here and now that will support them in doing their jobs. But that really then greatly clarified our focus for what we're actually going to do. and it made it really much faster actually to figure out, okay, what are our next steps? And then we were able to quickly build out our platform. And now I'm going to be done talking. I'm going to turn it all over to Sam to tell you in more detail what we did.
So Ed and the executive admin team came to this decision that we were going to build a one-stop shop for all of our basic and important trainings. And it needed to be streamlined. It needed to be easily accessible for everyone to be able to use it across all 3 of our schools. And so they reached out to me because during the pandemic, we had created a Google Classroom around professional development at our school already. And so we had tried it out a little bit at TCS. So kind of using some of those resources again that had already existed, although the focus of this was a little bit different. And so we were looking at, okay, so things like the nurses training, mandated reporting, Title IX training, basic expectations around technology use, other trainings like that are a lot more like knowledge-based, and you just need to know these things. We can fit those into a Google Classroom and use those on a technology platform to help new staff, especially mid-year hires, get up to date and running up quickly. And so we pulled a lot of the resources we already had. So like I mentioned, we had Google Classroom already, and we've used Google Classroom at all of our schools to some degree, some more than others, but it's something that most of our staff are pretty comfortable with. And then we also looked for presentations, documents, forms that had been used across all 3 of our schools for onboarding at the beginning of the year, and tried to pull in things that we already had. So it was a lot less of creating new things and a lot more of pulling and refining and making things more generalized and broad for all 3 of our schools, so that we weren't, like Ed mentioned, coming up with all these new things. We weren't buying new platforms or anything like that. We were trying to recycle things that had been used and had worked well before. And so, as Ed mentioned, we needed to see like what is the list of trainings and which ones are we going to focus on. So that adaptive versus technical change. So this list that you can see just a small screenshot of went down to, I think, like row 70 something in the list of different PDs that we could consider. And then there was a lot of color coding involved to figure out, okay, so what's going to be the most important to add on there and make sure that we have ready to go for any staff that we have coming in. And another part of that process was considering, so teachers are our main block of staff that will probably access this, but we also have a lot of other personnel throughout our schools. What trainings are necessary for them, who is like interacting with students and therefore needs like some of these specific trainings that are based on their interactions with students, and who's not maybe and doesn't need that specific training, who is going to be doing testing, who's not. And so going through each of those trainings and seeing, okay, which roles does this apply to when we are hiring on new staff? And then we also looked at, is there already a PD platform for this particular training? And if so, then we're not going to worry about that one. And so when building this one-stop shop, a lot of what I did was coordinate with the executive administration team and then administrators from each of our different schools to pull together a lot of these different documents and things like that. And then we also pulled together a lot of like, what are the similar and different needs and challenges? So one of the things that came up was we originally structured this Google Classroom in beautiful topics that were laid out by like what each of the trainings was about. So we had like legal reporting, and then we had like testing, and we had technology. And then we realized as we were trying to get it up and running that in order to keep it simple enough that our administrators could access it very quickly and decide what they needed to assign for any new hires, we needed to reorganize it. And it needed to be organized by things that would be automatically assigned to all staff, things like mandated reporting, things like Title IX training, all staff have to take, and then things that might be different from different role to different role or different building to different building. And so we reorganized the topics in our Google Classroom around those specific challenges so that it would be more accessible and easier for an administrator who already does not have a lot of time to be sitting down and doing these pieces to go in, pick out the trainings that their new hire needs and assign it to them so that that new hire can take the time to do the trainings and it's already there and ready for them to go. So we also are working on the implementation challenges. So this was built over this past spring and summer. And the first time we really got to test run a little bit of it was during the August PD. And we are actually in the process of test running it with some new mid-year hires that we are getting at each of our schools over these couple of weeks. So we are troubleshooting as challenges arise. And a couple of the things that we're trying to maintain are keeping that simplicity. Like the goal of this is for it to be quick and clean and for people to get what they need efficiently. And then also to make sure things are up to date. We all know that, laws are always coming up and changing and shifting, or Title IX may get shifted, may not. So just trying to make sure those materials are in line with what our staff needs to know as things move and shift around throughout the year. We also are monitoring staff engagement with the system. The goal is for it to be easily accessible. If it's easily accessible, hopefully most of our staff are using it in some way, shape, or form. And so seeing if that is happening, and if it's not, what is the barrier and can we remove that barrier so that it is more useful? Because the goal is for this to help reduce that capacity overload for a lot of our staff. And then using a lot of feedback to rethink and revise moving forward. Something that administrators realized as we were beginning the year is that Google Classroom only allows you to be either a teacher or a student. And so if they have to be in there as a teacher to assign things to their hires, they can't also be a student taking the trainings so that we can record that they've taken certain trainings. And so that was a challenge we came into. We had to create some new profiles. And so we're still in the process of seeing where is this working really well? Where is it smooth? Where is it really keeping things running? And where are we kind of hitting some hiccups that we need to adjust as we go? Ed, did you want to say any more about those implementation challenges?
No, I mean, those are spot on. I think the one thing that this has saved us from is the tyranny of email, where everything is housed in email, and you send a link out, say, hey, please do let's use the fraud training as an example. You send the link, and then you have to wait for people to get back to you. This is the spot where they go. And it makes it easier. I know if I'm getting training things, I'm going to go here. And then it allows you, because it's a pretty simple, if you know Google Classroom, it's a pretty simple structure to operate in. It's really easy for them to, basically announce that they finished it. And then their direct supervisor or supervisors can just look and say, okay, cool, good, you got that done. And we can move forward. So what has been surprising, though, is how once we started this, we discovered there's all these other platforms that are there and available. And how do you keep navigating and making sure that you just keep it as simple as possible? It doesn't need that curation. Systems will start to break if we make them hard, and we try to do more with them than what they were really built for. And so really recognizing what goes where, how do we navigate through those decisions. And so we've tried really hard, and we're not a big school. We have about 800 kids, just over 100 staff members, but it's surprisingly challenging to keep things really focused in the area it needs to be when you've got a lot of ideas and thoughts. And we work with a lot of great creative people, and they bring new ideas, and it's like, that's awesome, but we want to think through keeping it simple, making sure it works well, and then revising as we need is really the goal right now. And maybe we'll get to more later, but this right now, we want it to work.
Those are the pieces of the presentation we had to share with you for today. You're welcome to take a picture of our emails, and you are welcome to send us an email. But we'd love to know if you have questions, if you have comments, anything that you'd like to share.